Our neighbors when I was growing up had 3 kids the same ages as myself and my siblings. We were all friends and got along well for the most part. Their eldest child, I'll call him Peter, has Asperger's syndrome and was known to have outbursts that would sometimes be violent. One day, when I was 5 or 6, our mothers decided to take all 6 of us to a nearby wading pool because it was hot out. Well, due to that, it was pretty busy, and there were a lot of other kids. There were 2 lifeguards there, but were generally too busy chatting with each other to be doing their jobs, as my mother later tells me. I was off with my neighbor's daughter, was my age, and Peter. I don't remember why, but he suddenly flew into a fit and decided that I was at fault for something. He, being about 8 and a lot bigger than me, grabs my head and holds it under the water. I remember that. I remember not being able to breathe. I remember clearly thinking that I needed air or I was going to die. I remember fighting, but not being strong enough to get him off of me. Then I remember my mom's face. She had a clear look of both terror and fury. I remember looking over and seeing Peter sitting with his arms around his knees, rocking back and forth as his mother tried to calm him down. Then I remember my mom absolutely losing it on the lifeguards who had missed everything and were clueless as to why this tiny woman was screaming at them that her daughter had almost drowned on their watch. To this day, I have a fear of swimming and absolutely do not like having water on my face, even when I'm showering.
Throwaway, because it got some media. I'm a criminal defense attorney. I was representing this guy that had embezzled almost $500,000 from his business partner. He was looking down the barrel at several years in prison, a bunch of his assets had been seized by the government, was being sued by multiple creditors for north of $2 million, and was in the midst of an ugly divorce and wasn't allowed to see his kids. I was one of 3 lawyers he had, criminal, civil and divorce. He was drinking a lot and using coke. I used to get his incoherent phone calls in the middle of the night, that ranged from threats to crying. He came to my office one day and asked for me, but I was in court. My secretary said he was perfectly civil. He then went to his divorce lawyer's office and shot him to death. Got stopped by the police a short distance away and was wounded in a shootout. He would later tell the cops that he had come to my office to shoot me that day and also planned to shoot his civil attorney. Thank God, for my nosy neighbors. I always used to hate how nosy they were, until this happened. When I was about 10, I was riding my bike outside. My parents always let me ride my bike outside during the summer, but only up and down the street we were on. One day, a man in a van was parked across the street. He called to me, asking me if I had seen his dog and could help him find it. Me, being a dumb child, offered to help him find it, and I started walking towards his van. My neighbor, an older white lady, came bolting out of her house hooting and yelling, telling the guy to back off. The dude got back in his car in a hurry and took off. And it wasn't until many years later that I realized how bad that situation could have been.
I was abducted at a gas station during undergrad. The locks on my car were broken, and as soon as I got back in, a strange man came in and forced me to drive him to an ATM. I'm paralyzed with fear, so any sense or reason I had went out the window. He claimed he worked at Wendy's and for my generosity he would give me all the Wendy's I ever wanted. On the way to the ATM he showed me pictures of his daughters, on his clearly stolen cell phone. Then a Whitney Houston song came on the radio and he starts bawling his eyes out and screaming, "Why do all the good people have to die? Only bad things should happen to bad people." I go to the ATM, take out cash, give it to him thinking it's over. He then makes me get back in the car and drive him somewhere else. We pass by some train tracks and I'm thinking this is it, this is where I will be murdered. He asks me what I'm studying in school, and I tell him biochemistry. I believe in jet propulsion and all that shit. We are not alone, aliens are among us. He then makes me pull over at a gas station and he tells me, "Drive away, sweetheart." I call the cops, had to do a lineup. Apparently this dude had done this to a ton of other women, and some were less unscathed than I was.
I was exiting a bar once after last call and was with a friend who was a medic. We saw a girl laying in a snowbank, near a telephone pole, who had just been hit by a car. We ran over and tried to help her. Some others were already on the phone with 911 and I, not having any medical training, didn't have anything to contribute but didn't want to just leave. The whole situation was concerning. I turn around for a second and start to hear people screaming. I turn around and a minivan was heading for us. The few people around this woman, they already started to run, but I was too late. He hit me as I was trying to flee. Put the car in reverse, ran over me again, and then went forward and run over me a third time. Turns out the guy was high and drunk and got into a fight with the women's BF. whom I bared a strong resemblance to. He thought I was him. Not to throw a pity party for myself, but 9 years later, I have a ton of medical issues, and my life pretty much started on a downward spiral since then. But sure, I guess I survived.
I was 14 and outside in my garage petting my cat. It was November, so it was already dark by 5 p.m. Someone opened the door behind me without me hearing, grabbed me by my ponytail and started dragging me outside. They hit me on my head with a brick and knocked me out. Pulled me halfway around my house when, I'm guessing this is when, they stabbed me on the left side of my stomach. This must have brought me out of my daze, because my mom said she heard me scream from inside where she and my brother and sister were in the kitchen. They came out the front door and saw me bleeding out on the sidewalk, called 911. Had 12 stitches, double layer, a severe concussion, and whiplash. Didn't eat and hardly slept for a week. They never found them.
Sophomore year of college, went with a friend to go hang out at his old college. We were supposed to crash with a few friends of his, but we met a few ladies and ended up at a pool party. Next day, went home and my friend started getting calls from one of his buddies' moms asking if he'd seen him. Turns out, in the middle of the night, a few guys broke into the house, kidnapped my friend's buddy and roommate. Took their car and drove them out to the middle of nowhere and executed them. I guess it was part of some gang initiation. I was supposed to sleep there with my friend. I still sometimes think about it and get the shivers. I was 19, driving through the center of Johannesburg, South Africa from Wits University. During rush hour. Loads of cars and people. I was winding up my window, old Golf, when 4 guys come up and surround my car. In the car was myself, my sister, and my 3 friends. As I was rolling up my window, the guy at my window reaches into my car and switches the ignition off and goes for my keys, all the while yelling phones and wallets now or you die. I did the only natural thing and grabbed his arm and hold him in the car window fighting for my keys. He pulled out and came down hard on my arm. Twice. Second time something snapped and I let go. I thought I had broken my arm. He flees and all his guys go too. My mates jump out and start chasing them down. I found the keys on the road just outside my door. I can't drive, arm is broken. I jump into the back seat as my mate returns with blood on his shirt. He jumps in the driver's seat and pulls off like a madman. All of this within 2 minutes, at a red light with about 30 cars around us. No one stopped to help, they just drove around us. Only then did I realize I had been stabbed twice on the arm. The second time the guy had severed all of my tendons in my forearm and there is blood everywhere. Like Dexter splatter patterns on the seats, windows, and myself. Luckily, I had a roll of bandage in the car, wrapped my arm and got to the hospital near my place, about 20 kilometers at 1700 rush hour, in about 20 minutes. I was in the operating theater within an hour of being stabbed. I could have been stabbed in the chest or neck, luckily it was just my arm. Fully recovered with an interesting scar and about 95% of my former mobility. This all happened many years ago. I was a lead man at a factory. A girl starts working there, and I take an interest. After a few months, I find out she is in a terrible, drug-fueled, abusive relationship. Every night I tell her to call me, I'll come get her. Finally after months she calls me. I come get her and take her to my house. The guy she was in the relationship with didn't take too kindly to me taking her away. He spends the next 2 years harassing and threatening us. A few months after she and I got married, we went out for a few drinks. Her ex just happened to be at the bar we went to. He apologized to us for the threats and harassment. We were sitting outside talking with a few other people. Next thing I know, I'm on my back on the ground with someone choking me. I try all I can to get them off of me, but being blindsided and them being on top of me, it wasn't easy. As I struggle to get free, everything goes black. Then I see the light at the end of the tunnel. In that moment I was certain that this was the end of me. I somehow managed to get a better hold of this person's head, and I yanked them off of me. We run to the car and get away. A week or so later, my wife had been talking to everyone she thinks might know what happened. Turns out, her ex had paid 2 people $50 to kill me that night.
I was riding in a train across Eastern Europe. I was running low on money, and even though I had been warned that a woman should not travel alone in second-class seating, I did not spring for first class. I was sitting alone in one of the compartments that seats 6. This was also a mistake and a very stupid one to sit alone. Eventually the train stopped and the man got on. He was very drunk. He came into my compartment and I guess thought I looked like his ex-wife. He attacked me. If it were not for the fact that this particular station was the border between two countries, I would be dead. Instead, border patrol from both countries were on the train, and while I was unable to scream, the door was open and at least a half a dozen uniformed men jumped him and saved me. I was in the hospital for a little while but recovered. At one point during the trial, one of the cops asked me if I wanted him and his buddies to hold the guy down while I hit him. I thought he was joking. So I said no, go ahead, you do it. I was also joking. But it turns out they took it seriously and were about to. I did put a stop to that, at least. But they were so offended that someone from their country would attack a young, female American tourist. They were furious with him. So many people there depended upon tourism.